Have you ever laid awake at 3 in the morning, your mind racing with worries about tomorrow, replaying conversations from yesterday, imagining disasters that haven't happened and probably never will? Your heart pounds, your breath becomes shallow, and no matter how hard you try to calm down, the anxiety just keeps building like a wave that refuses to break. You're not alone in this struggle. Millions of people around the world are trapped in this same cycle of anxious thoughts, desperately seeking relief from the constant mental noise. But what if I told you that over 2,500 years ago, a man sitting beneath a tree discovered a truth about anxiety that could completely transform your relationship with worry and fear? What if the very thing you've been doing to try to fix your anxiety has actually been making it worse? Today we're going to explore a profound Buddhist teaching that challenges everything our modern culture tells us about dealing with anxiety, and by the end of this video, you'll understand why the path to peace isn't about controlling your anxious thoughts, but about fundamentally changing how you relate to them. Let's start with something that might surprise you. Buddhism doesn't actually tell you to get rid of anxiety. In fact, one of the foundational truths of Buddhist philosophy is that suffering, discomfort, and difficult emotions are inherent parts of human existence. The Buddha called this the first noble truth, known as dukkha. This isn't a pessimistic view of life, but rather a realistic one. The Buddha wasn't saying that life is only suffering, but that suffering, dissatisfaction, and unease are woven into the fabric of our experience. Anxiety falls squarely into this category. It's not an aberration or a sign that something is fundamentally wrong with you. It's part of the human condition. But here's where it gets interesting, and where the Buddhist perspective diverges dramatically from our typical modern approach. We live in a culture that treats anxiety like an enemy to be defeated, a problem to be solved, a malfunction to be fixed. We're told to eliminate it, overcome it, conquer it. We reach for medications. We try to think positive thoughts. We distract ourselves with endless entertainment. We buy products promising to calm our nerves. And yes, some of these things can be helpful in their place, but they all share a common underlying assumption that anxiety is the problem and that getting rid of it is the solution. Buddhism offers a radically different perspective. The problem isn't anxiety itself, the problem is our relationship with anxiety. The problem is what we do with the anxious feelings when they arise. This is where we encounter one of the most transformative Buddhist teachings, the concept of tanha, often translated as craving, clinging, or attachment. Tanha is considered the second noble truth, the cause of suffering, but it's more nuanced than simply wanting things. Tanha includes 3 types of craving. First, there's the craving for pleasant experiences, wanting things to feel good. Second, there's the craving for existence, wanting to be someone, to have an identity, to matter. And third, and this is crucial for understanding anxiety, there's the craving for non-existence, the desire for certain experiences, feelings, or aspects of reality to go away, to not be. When anxiety arises in your body and mind, what's your immediate reaction? If you're like most people, you want it gone, you resist it, you fight against it. You tell yourself you shouldn't feel this way. You try to push it down, distract yourself from it, or reason it away. This resistance, this craving for the anxiety to not exist, is itself a form of tanha. And here's the paradox that the Buddha understood so clearly. This very resistance to anxiety, this fighting against it, this desperate wanting it to disappear, creates a secondary layer of suffering that's often worse than the original anxious feeling. Let me explain this more clearly, because it's absolutely crucial. When you feel anxiety, there's the direct physical and emotional experience, the rapid heartbeat, the tight chest, the racing thoughts, the sense of dread. That's the primary anxiety. But then, almost immediately, your mind adds another layer. You start thinking about the anxiety. You judge it, you catastrophize about it. You think things like, I can't handle this, or why am I like this, or this is never going to end, or something must be wrong with me. You might feel anxiety about feeling anxious. You might feel frustrated, ashamed, or defeated. All of this mental and emotional activity on top of the original anxiety creates what Buddhists might call secondary suffering. The original anxiety might be uncomfortable, but it's the layers of resistance, judgment, and story-making that turn discomfort into genuine anguish. Think of it this way. Imagine you're standing in the ocean and a wave of anxiety hits you. That's the primary experience. It's uncomfortable, yes, but it's also temporary. Waves come and waves go, but instead of letting the wave pass through you, you tense up your entire body. You start fighting against the water, thrashing and struggling, all while screaming in your mind about how unfair it is that this wave exists and how you need to make it stop immediately. What happens? You exhaust yourself. You create more turbulence in the water around you. You might even go under. The wave was always going to pass, but your resistance to it created so much more suffering than the wave itself ever could. This is what we do with anxiety. We take a temporary, uncomfortable feeling, and through our resistance to it, we turn it into something that feels unbearable and endless. Buddhism teaches us a different way, and it's encapsulated in a practice that might sound simple, but is profoundly transformative when truly understood and applied. This practice is mindfulness, or in Pali, the language of the earliest Buddhist texts, sati. Mindfulness is often misunderstood in our culture. It's been turned into a commodity, a relaxation technique, something you do with an app for 10 minutes before bed. But in Buddhism, mindfulness is something much deeper. It's a way of being present with your experience exactly as it is, without trying to change it, without judging it, without adding stories to it. It's a quality of clear, non-reactive awareness. When applied to anxiety, mindfulness doesn't mean you're trying to relax or make the anxiety go away. Instead, you're learning to be with the anxiety, to observe it with curiosity rather than fear, to see it clearly without all the mental commentary that usually accompanies it. Here's how this works in practice. The next time you notice anxiety arising, instead of immediately trying to fix it, fight it, or figure out what's wrong, try this. Pause. Take a breath. And then turn your attention toward the anxiety itself with genuine curiosity. Where do you feel it in your body? Is it in your chest, your stomach, your throat? What are the actual physical sensations? Is there tightness, heat, pressure, tingling? Don't think about the sensations, feel them directly. Notice how they change moment by moment, because they do change. They're not static, even though they feel that way. Now, notice what your mind is doing. What thoughts are accompanying these sensations? Are you thinking about the future? Are you replaying the past? Are you judging yourself? Just notice these thoughts without getting caught up in them, as if you're watching clouds pass through the sky. Notice any urge to make the feelings go away. Notice the resistance. Notice the voice that says, "I don't want this." And here's the key. See if you can let all of this be here without fighting it. Not because you like it, not because you're giving up, but because it's already here. Fighting against what's already present is like arguing with the weather. It doesn't change the weather, it just exhausts you. This is the practice of what Buddhists call radical acceptance, or, in some traditions, loving awareness. You're not accepting that anxiety should always be part of your life, or that you should never try to understand its causes or work with it skillfully. You're simply accepting that right now, in this moment, anxiety is present. And by accepting this simple fact, you stop adding that layer of resistance and secondary suffering. Now you might be thinking, but won't accepting my anxiety just make it worse? Won't I be stuck with it forever if I don't fight it? This is a common fear, and it's based on a misunderstanding. There's a huge difference between acceptance and resignation. Resignation is passive, defeated, hopeless. It says, "I give up, I'm broken, nothing will ever change." Acceptance is active, clear-eyed, and actually empowering. It says, "This is what's happening right now. I don't have to like it, but I can be with it. And from this place of clarity, I can respond wisely rather than react blindly." In fact, research in psychology has validated this Buddhist principle through something called acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, which is based significantly on Buddhist mindfulness principles. Studies have shown that people who learn to accept their anxious thoughts and feelings, rather than fighting them, actually experience less anxiety over time. The anxiety doesn't necessarily disappear entirely, but it loses its power over them. It becomes less intense, less frequent, and less debilitating. They develop what psychologists call psychological flexibility, the ability to be present with difficult experiences while still taking action toward what matters to them in life. This brings us to another crucial Buddhist teaching, the concept of impermanence, or anicca. Everything changes, nothing stays the same. This includes your anxiety. Every emotion, every thought, every physical sensation arises, exists for a time, and then passes away. This is not just philosophy, it's observable reality. But when we're caught in anxiety, we forget this truth. The anxiety feels permanent, solid, unchanging. We think, this is how I feel, this is who I am, this will never end. But if you actually pay close attention through mindfulness, you'll notice something remarkable. The anxiety is not one solid block of experience. It's actually a constantly shifting flow of sensations, thoughts, and emotions. The tightness in your chest intensifies for a moment, then eases slightly. Your thoughts race for a few seconds, then there's a brief gap of stillness before they start up again. The sense of dread peaks, and then subsides. Nothing about your inner experience is actually static, even though your mind tells you it is. Understanding impermanence at a deep experiential level through mindfulness practice is incredibly liberating. When you really know, not just intellectually, but in your bones, that this anxious moment will pass, that you felt this way before and it did pass, that every state of mind is temporary. You can relax into the present moment, even when it's uncomfortable. You develop trust in the process of experience itself. You realize that you don't have to fix every uncomfortable feeling immediately because you know it will shift on its own. This doesn't mean you become passive or that you ignore important signals your anxiety might be sending you. Buddhism is always about the middle way, avoiding extremes. You're not trying to cling to pleasant states or push away unpleasant ones. You're simply meeting each moment with clear awareness and responding appropriately. Sometimes anxiety is telling you something important. Maybe you need to prepare better for that presentation. Maybe you need to have a difficult conversation. Maybe you need to examine your lifestyle choices or seek support for trauma you've experienced. Buddhist mindfulness helps you hear these messages clearly without the distortion of panic and catastrophic thinking. You can acknowledge the anxiety, extract any useful information it contains, and then take wise action from a place of clarity rather than fear. There's another Buddhist concept that's particularly relevant to anxiety, and that's the idea of the second arrow. The Buddha told a parable about this. He said that when an arrow strikes you, you feel pain. That's the first arrow, and it's unavoidable in life. But then we often shoot ourselves with a second arrow by our reaction to the first. We add mental suffering to physical or emotional pain through our judgments, our resistance, our stories about what the pain means. With anxiety, the first arrow is the original feeling, perhaps triggered by a real stressor or arising from your nervous system's wiring. The second arrow is everything you do in response that makes it worse. The self-criticism for feeling anxious, the worry about the anxiety itself, the rumination about why you're like this, the comparing yourself to others who seem so calm and confident, the feeling of failure because you can't just get over it, the fear that you'll never be able to live a normal life. These second arrows often cause more suffering than the first arrow ever could. And here's the beautiful thing. While you may not always be able to control whether the first arrow strikes, you have much more control over whether you shoot yourself with the second one. Through mindfulness practice, through cultivating acceptance, through understanding impermanence, you learn to stop shooting yourself with second arrows. You feel the anxiety, yes, but you don't pile judgment and story on top of it. This alone can reduce your suffering dramatically. Let me share something that might deepen your understanding even further. In Buddhism, there's a teaching about the nature of the self that's directly relevant to anxiety. The doctrine of anatta, or non-self, suggests that what we think of as our solid, permanent self is actually a process, a constantly changing flow of physical sensations, emotions, thoughts, and consciousness. There's no unchanging core of you that exists separate from these processes. Now, this might sound abstract or even unsettling, but it has profound practical implications for anxiety. When you identify with your anxiety, when you think, I am an anxious person, you're creating a solid sense of self around a temporary emotional state. You're taking something fluid and making it into something fixed and permanent. This identification makes the anxiety feel like an inescapable part of who you are rather than a passing experience you're having. Through mindfulness, you start to see that you are not your anxiety. You are the awareness within which anxiety arises. You are the space in which thoughts and feelings come and go. This shift in perspective is subtle but revolutionary. Instead of "I am anxious," which creates identity and solidity, you begin to notice there is anxiety present, or anxious thoughts are arising. It sounds like a small linguistic difference, but it reflects a huge shift in your relationship to the experience. You're no longer trapped inside the anxiety, you're the vast awareness holding it. The anxiety becomes something you observe rather than something you are. This creates natural distance and perspective. It's like the difference between being caught in a storm and watching a storm from the safety of a shelter. The storm is still happening, but your relationship to it is completely different. Buddhist meditation practice is designed to cultivate this kind of awareness. Whether it's breath meditation, body scan meditation, or open awareness practice, the goal is always to strengthen your capacity to observe your experience without getting lost in it, to be present without being overwhelmed, to see clearly without reacting automatically. And this capacity is like a muscle. The more you practice, the stronger it gets. At first, you might only be able to maintain this clear awareness for a few seconds before you get swept back into anxious thinking. But with practice, those seconds become minutes. You develop what Buddhists call equanimity, the ability to remain balanced and centered, even in the midst of challenging experiences. Equanimity doesn't mean you don't care or that you become emotionless. It means you're not constantly thrown off balance by every shift in your inner weather. You can feel anxiety without being destroyed by it. You can acknowledge difficulty without being defined by it. You can experience discomfort without making it mean something catastrophic about you or your future. This is true freedom, not the absence of anxiety, but the ability to live fully, even when anxiety is present. Now, I want to address something important. Some people hear these Buddhist teachings and think they mean you should never try to change your circumstances, or that you should just passively accept everything without taking action. This is a misunderstanding. Buddhism teaches both acceptance and wise action. It's not either or, it's both and. You accept what is present in this moment because fighting against present reality creates suffering, but from that place of acceptance and clarity, you can take skillful action to change future conditions. If your anxiety is related to a toxic work environment, mindfulness helps you see that clearly without the fog of panic, and then you can take steps to find a new job. If your anxiety is exacerbated by poor sleep, too much caffeine, or lack of exercise, mindfulness helps you notice these patterns without judgment, and then you can make different choices. If your anxiety stems from unprocessed trauma, acceptance helps you stop fighting against your symptoms long enough to seek appropriate therapy. The point is that acceptance is not inaction, it's the foundation for truly effective action. When you're not wasting all your energy fighting against what is, you have much more capacity to create what could be. There's also a beautiful Buddhist practice called metta, or loving kindness meditation, that can be particularly powerful for people struggling with anxiety. Often anxiety is accompanied by harsh self-judgment. You're not just anxious, you're angry at yourself for being anxious. You feel weak, broken, defective. Metta practice involves directing genuine goodwill and compassion toward yourself and others. You might sit quietly and repeat phrases like, "May I be safe," "May I be peaceful," "May I be healthy," "May I live with ease." At first, this might feel awkward or fake, especially if you're used to being critical of yourself. But with practice, you're actually retraining your mind to relate to yourself with kindness rather than hostility. You're learning to meet your anxiety with gentleness rather than aggression. Imagine how different it would feel if, when anxiety arose, instead of thinking, "What's wrong with me? I'm so pathetic," you thought, "This is difficult. I'm struggling right now. May I be kind to myself in this moment." That simple shift in how you talk to yourself can completely change the quality of your experience. You're still anxious, but you're no longer at war with yourself. You're holding your own pain with care. Let's go deeper into another aspect of Buddhist wisdom that's crucial for understanding anxiety. The Buddha taught about the nature of mind itself, and one of the key insights is that the mind has a natural tendency to proliferate, to take one thought and spin it into 1,000 thoughts. In Pali, this is called papanka, often translated as mental proliferation or conceptual elaboration. Here's how it works with anxiety. You have one worried thought. Maybe I have a lot to do tomorrow. That's a simple factual thought. But then your mind proliferates. I have so much to do. What if I don't get it all done? Then I'll look incompetent. People will judge me. I might lose my job. Then I won't be able to pay my bills. I'll end up alone and destitute. Notice what happened. You went from one neutral thought to an entire catastrophic story about your future and your worth as a person. This is papanka in action. The mind takes a small seed of concern and grows it into a forest of anxiety. The Buddhist practice of mindfulness helps you catch this process early. You notice the first thought, and instead of letting your mind proliferate it into a whole narrative, you simply note thinking and return your attention to the present moment, to your breath, to the sensations in your body. You're not suppressing the thought or pretending it's not there. You're simply choosing not to feed it with your attention, not to let it multiply unchecked. Over time, you develop the ability to see thoughts as just thoughts, not facts, not reality, not commands you must obey. A thought like, "This is unbearable," is just a thought. The actual experience might be uncomfortable, but your thought about it being unbearable is adding an extra layer. When you can separate the direct experience from the thoughts about the experience, you find much more space and peace. There's a Zen saying that captures this beautifully. You cannot stop the birds of worry from flying over your head, but you can stop them from building a nest in your hair. You can't control what thoughts arise. Anxious thoughts will come. That's part of having a human brain that's wired to detect threats and keep you safe. But you can control whether you give those thoughts all your attention, whether you believe them completely, whether you let them set up permanent residence in your mind. This is the practice. Not controlling your thoughts, but changing your relationship to them. Seeing them clearly for what they are, temporary mental events like clouds passing through the sky of your awareness. Some clouds are dark and heavy with rain, some are light and fluffy, but they all pass. None of them are the sky itself. You are the sky, vast and unchanging, and anxiety is just weather moving through. This brings us to a profound implication of Buddhist teaching. If you're seeking to eliminate anxiety completely, you're going to suffer because you're chasing an impossible goal. As long as you're alive, you'll have a nervous system, and that nervous system will sometimes respond to perceived threats with the activation we call anxiety. The question is not how to never feel anxiety, but how to live well even when anxiety is present. How to not let it rule your life. How to not be limited by it. How to pursue what matters to you even when you're scared. This is what psychologists now call willingness. The capacity to have your internal experiences, whatever they are, and still take action aligned with your values. From a Buddhist perspective, this is the essence of the path. You're not trying to control your inner experience. You're learning to live wisely regardless of what that inner experience is. You can feel anxious and still show up for your relationships. You can feel uncertain and still take risks on what matters to you. You can feel afraid and still move forward with courage. The anxiety doesn't have to go away for you to live fully. In fact, trying to make it go away often keeps you stuck. But when you let it be here, when you make space for it, when you stop fighting it, something paradoxical happens. It often does decrease, not because you're trying to make it decrease, but because you've stopped pouring fuel on the fire. As we come toward the end of this exploration, I want to emphasize that what I've shared today isn't just philosophy or theory. These are practices that have helped millions of people over thousands of years find peace in the midst of difficult minds and difficult lives. They're also increasingly validated by modern psychology and neuroscience. We now know that regular mindfulness practice actually changes the structure and function of the brain, strengthening areas associated with emotional regulation and weakening the overactivation of the amygdala, the brain's fear center. We know that acceptance-based approaches are as effective as cognitive behavioral therapy for anxiety disorders. The ancient wisdom of Buddhism is meeting modern science, and they're confirming each other. But more important than any study or brain scan is your own direct experience. I encourage you to try these practices yourself. Start with just 5 minutes a day of sitting quietly and observing your breath. When anxiety arises, Instead of your usual response, try meeting it with curiosity and compassion. Notice what happens. You might be surprised. You might find that the anxiety you've been fighting so hard against becomes more manageable when you stop fighting. Remember, the Buddha's final words were, "Strive diligently." The path requires practice, patience, and persistence. You won't transform your relationship with anxiety overnight. There will be difficult days. There will be times when you forget everything you've learned and get completely caught up in anxious thinking. That's okay. That's part of the path. Each time you notice you've gotten lost and you gently return to awareness, to acceptance, to the present moment, you're strengthening your practice. You're training your mind, you're cultivating freedom. And over time, the cumulative effect of this practice is profound. You begin to trust yourself. You begin to trust life. You begin to relax into the uncertainty that previously terrified you because you know that whatever arises, you can meet it. This is the Buddhist truth about anxiety. It's not something to be conquered or eliminated. It's something to be understood, accepted, and worked with skillfully. When you stop waging war against your own experience, when you stop treating anxiety as the enemy, when you learn to meet it as you would meet an old friend, even an uncomfortable one, everything changes. The anxiety might not disappear completely, but your suffering around it can. And that makes all the difference. You can live a rich, full, meaningful life, even if anxiety sometimes comes along for the ride. You're no longer limited by it. You're free. And that freedom is available to you right now in this moment. You're already whole. You're already enough. The peace you're seeking isn't somewhere else. It's here, in the willingness to be fully present with whatever is arising, including anxiety. Without resistance, without judgment, with an open heart and clear awareness. This is the path. This is the practice. This is the Buddhist truth about anxiety.